This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about a system that looks stable precisely when it is most vulnerable. An economy that appears calm because the pressure hasn't surfaced yet. Not because it's gone, but because it's been pushed forward in time. Right now, you are being shown reassuring numbers, prices that seem manageable, markets that look recovered, jobs that still exist. And the conclusion you're invited to draw is simple. Whatever was tried worked. But systems don't fail when alarms are loud. They fail when warning signals are reclassified as noise, when risk is rebranded as confidence, when delay is mistaken for resolution. What you're living inside of is not a result. It's a phase. If you're still here, stay with me, because the most dangerous part of this story is not what already happened. It's what had to be postponed to make this moment feel normal. And once you see what's actually holding this together, you won't be able to unsee it. What actually controls this system now is not policy, not legislation, not even growth. It's expectation. Specifically, the expectation that whatever breaks can be handled later, that whatever costs appear can be absorbed, that whatever instability emerges will stay contained. This is no longer an economy driven by production or productivity. It's an economy driven by tolerance. How much pressure households can absorb, how much uncertainty businesses will endure, how much credibility institutions can lose before anyone reacts. Personalities don't matter here. Intentions don't matter either, because once a system starts rewarding volatility, it stops responding to discipline and starts responding only to escalation. Short-term wins become the signal. Long-term costs become invisible, not erased, deferred. That's the shift. And when delay becomes the organizing principle of an economy, the question is no longer whether consequences arrive. It's whether they arrive slowly enough to look survivable or fast enough to overwhelm everything at once. Because the mechanism that's stabilizing this moment is the same one quietly destabilizing the next. There was a time when economic risk announced itself clearly. Recessions arrived with sirens. Crashes came with headlines. Pain was sudden, visible, undeniable. That's not how this works anymore. The shift didn't happen overnight. It happened through normalization, through repetition, through the quiet acceptance of things that used to be temporary. Emergency measures became routine. Extraordinary debt became background noise. Instability stopped being treated as a problem and started being treated as a tool. Before, markets reacted to policy. Now, policy reacts to markets before credibility anchored expectations. Now, expectations dictate credibility. This is slower. And that's why it's more dangerous, because nothing looks broken. Growth still prints. Jobs still exist. Prices haven't fully moved yet. But the system is no longer built to absorb shock. It's built to delay it. And delay creates the illusion of control, right up until the moment it doesn't. Because every system that survives by pushing risk forward eventually runs out of future. And we're closer to that edge than it appears. There was a moment when the system flinched, not slowly, not abstractly, all at once. In less than 48 hours, trillions of dollars disappeared. Markets didn't debate, they reacted. The drop was sharp, fast enough to feel accidental, large enough to feel historical. And then something strange happened. Nothing followed. No collapse, no sustained panic, no visible aftermath. Prices stabilized, indexes rebounded, headlines moved on, which is why this moment matters. Because that shock wasn't the story. It was a stress test. It revealed how much of the system is now held together. By confidence that reversals will arrive before consequences do, by the belief that volatility itself will be managed, not resolved. If you're still watching, this is where you should pay attention. Because what looked like resilience was actually absorption. Losses were taken, costs were delayed, pressure was redistributed, and every time that happens, the structure changes shape. Not weaker yet, but different. And the next shock won't ask permission before finding the new fault lines. Here's the part you're not supposed to notice. The system didn't recover because the damage disappeared. It recovered because the damage was reassigned. Costs didn't vanish, they moved. Some were pushed onto companies, forced to absorb losses temporarily. Some were pushed into the future, hidden behind inventory, contracts, and accounting assumptions. Some were shifted onto households quietly, one price adjustment at a time. This is how the mechanism works. You create pressure. You introduce friction. You promise relief later. And in the gap between pressure and relief, someone floats the cost. Businesses compress margins. Workers fill shortages. Institutions bend rules they were designed not to bend. It looks functional because everyone is compensating at once. But compensation is not resilience. It's strain management, and strain accumulates. The beneficiaries are visible in the short term. Higher valuations, temporary growth, political proof points. The damage is harder to see because it's fragmented, spread thin, delayed just enough to feel survivable. But systems that rely on silent absorption don't fail loudly at first. They fail when absorption capacity runs out. And that limit is closer than it looks. Now the pace changes. Margins thin, inventories shrink, buffers disappear. There is less room, less time, less flexibility. Decisions that used to be gradual become immediate. Absorption turns into pass-through. Delay turns into exposure. Prices start to move, not all at once, but unevenly. Some rise quietly. Some jump suddenly. None go back. Signals multiply. None look decisive on their own. Together, they accelerate. Markets begin to twitch instead of trend. Hiring slows without announcing itself. Investment pauses without calling it fear. Nothing breaks, but everything tightens, and tightening changes behavior. Companies stop planning long-term. Households stop trusting stability. Institutions stop pretending control is permanent. This is how acceleration actually happens. Not through collapse, through compression. Each adjustment makes the next one faster. Each workaround reduces the space for the one after it. And once a system enters this phase, it doesn't return to normal by choice. It moves forward until something forces it to stop. This is the point where it reaches you. Not as a headline, not as a chart, as a feeling. You start budgeting differently, not because things are impossible, but because they're unpredictable. You delay purchases. You hesitate on commitments. You keep more cash than you plan to. Nothing dramatic, just subtle restraint. Work feels less secure even if your job still exists. Raises don't feel like progress. They feel like compensation for something you can't quite name. This is how systemic strain becomes personal. Not through crisis, through erosion. And here's the part no one advertises. When millions of people behave this way at once, the economy responds. Spending slows. Investment hesitates. Confidence fractures quietly. If this feels familiar, that's not an accident. You've lived through versions of this before. They just didn't announce themselves until later. Stay with me here. Because once individual caution becomes collective behavior, the system starts reacting to fear instead of growth. And that's when private decisions begin shaping public outcomes. What begins as a domestic adjustment doesn't stay domestic for long because this system is not isolated. It's entangled. Trade partners respond not to policy, but to unpredictability. Allies hedge. Competitors probe. Supply chains that took decades to build don't collapse. They hesitate. They reroute. They fragment. Capital becomes cautious across borders. Investment waits for clarity that never quite arrives. Deals slow, not because they're bad, but because timing feels wrong. And uncertainty is contagious. When one major economy signals that rules are flexible, others stop trusting the rules entirely. They build redundancies. They raise barriers. They prepare for instability instead of cooperation. This is the ripple effect. Not dramatic. Persistent. Growth forecasts soften. Risk premiums rise. Global planning shortens its horizon. And here's the danger. Once enough actors plan for disruption, disruption becomes the default outcome. No one has to choose collapse. They just have to stop assuming stability. And the moment that assumption disappears, the system behaves very differently. From here, the system doesn't move in one direction. It opens into three. The first path is adjustment. Pressure is acknowledged. Costs are distributed deliberately. Growth slows, but remains intact. Nothing feels good, but nothing breaks. The second path is erosion. Delay continues. Confidence thins. Institutions lose authority one concession at a time. Living standards don't collapse. They shrink quietly, unevenly, permanently. The third path is rupture. Absorption fails. Pass-through accelerates. Markets stop waiting for reassurance and start demanding it. That's when volatility stops being episodic and becomes structural. None of these paths announce themselves in advance. They overlap. They blur. Early adjustment can slide into erosion. Erosion can harden into rupture. And the system won't choose consciously. It will respond to pressure, incentives, and timing. Right now, all three paths remain open, which makes this moment deceptively calm because the future isn't locked in yet. But the speed at which it closes options is increasing. And what happens next depends less on intent than on how much strain the system can still absorb. This is where I don't offer reassurance, because systems like this don't end with clarity. They end with recognition, usually late. What you are seeing now is not stability. It's capacity. How much pressure can still be held without showing cracks? Markets can rise inside fragile structures. Employment can persist inside deteriorating systems. Calm can exist right up until it doesn't. And the danger is not that something dramatic happens tomorrow. It's that nothing dramatic happens at all. That delay keeps winning. That absorption keeps working until it suddenly can't. When that moment arrives, it won't feel like a surprise. It will feel obvious in retrospect, like all systemic failures do. So this isn't a warning about panic. It's a warning about normalization, about mistaking endurance for health, about confusing postponement with resolution. If you're still watching, that matters, because attention is the only thing this system doesn't currently price in. In the next video, we're going to look at the exact point where systems like this historically stop bending and start breaking, and why that point is never where anyone expects it to be. Stay with it, because once the surface story collapses, the underlying one moves very fast. If you want to understand that moment before it arrives, this is where you stay.